Girl is humiliated because of her skin color. When they find out who her father is, everyone reconsiders their prejudices. Zuri walked through the crowded school hallway, her heart racing with each step. The sounds of laughter and whispers filled the air around her, wrapping around her like a heavy blanket. It felt as if the eyes of her classmates pierced through her skin, judging her every move. She glanced at the groups of students, their heads bent together, their giggles sharp and cutting. Zuri tightened her grip on her backpack, wishing she could disappear. "Did you see what she's wearing?" a girl whispered to her friend, a smirk on her face. Zuri's cheeks flushed with embarrassment, and she quickly looked away, trying to block out the laughter that echoed in her ears. In that moment, memories flooded her mind. She remembered the days when she sat alone at lunch, the cruel words thrown at her like daggers. "You don't belong here," they said. "Why don't you just go back to where you came from?" The pain of those moments wrapped around her heart, making it sink deep into her chest. Zuri often felt invisible, like a shadow passing through the bright, busy world of her peers. Just then, a familiar figure caught her eye. Madison, the queen bee of the school, stood at the center of a group, her laughter ringing out like a bell. Zuri's heart sank even lower. Madison was known for her sharp tongue and cruel jokes, and today was no different. Zuri could already sense the new wave of ridicule coming her way. "Look who decided to show up," Madison said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "The ghost of fashion passed." The group erupted in laughter, and Zuri's stomach twisted into knots. She wanted to scream, to shout that this wasn't fair, but the words never came. Instead, she took a deep breath and tried to keep walking, her head held high, even as her heart felt heavy. As the day dragged on, Zuri's mind raced. The thought of her upcoming presentation loomed over her like a dark cloud. She had been chosen to present a project about her family, a task that filled her with both dread and a flicker of hope. How could she share her story when all she felt was shame? But maybe, just maybe, this was a chance to show them who she really was. Later, as Zuri sat at her desk, she felt a mix of anxiety and anticipation. Her palms were sweaty, and she could feel the weight of her classmates' stares. Would they laugh again? Would they care? She took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside her. "Are you ready for this, Zuri?" Her friend Mia whispered, concern etched on her face. Zuri forced a smile, but inside, she felt like a storm was brewing. "I guess I have to be," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. When the time finally came, Zuri stood at the front of the class, her heart pounding like a drum. The classroom was silent, the tension thick in the air. She looked out at the faces staring back at her, some curious, some bored, and some still wearing smirks of disdain. With each word she spoke, she felt a flicker of bravery igniting within her. "I want to tell you about my family," she began, her voice trembling. "My dad, Daniel Johnson, is..." As she spoke her father's name, a hush fell over the room. The whispers stopped, and for the first time, Zuri felt seen. She could feel the change in the atmosphere, a spark of curiosity replacing the contempt that had once surrounded her. Zuri's heart raced, and she pushed through her fear. She shared stories about her father, about his dreams and struggles, and how they shaped her. With every word, she felt stronger. This was her moment to shine, to be proud of who she was. And so, Zuri stood tall, embracing the weight of her story, ready to take on whatever came next. For the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Would they understand? Would they finally see her? Only time would tell. Zuri stood at the front of the classroom, her heart racing. She could feel the heat rising in her cheeks as she clutched her project. The room buzzed with whispers and laughter, and she felt like a spotlight was shining directly on her, exposing her every flaw. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but her palms were sweaty, and her voice trembled. "Okay, hi everyone," Zuri began, her voice barely above a whisper. She glanced around the room, noticing familiar faces of classmates who often mocked her. Madison, with her perfectly styled hair and confident smile, sat in the front, surrounded by her group of friends. Zuri's heart sank as she remembered all the times Madison had laughed at her. As she started to talk about her family, the laughter grew louder. "Today, I will present about my dad," she stammered, her words tumbling out. "His name is Daniel Johnson. Suddenly, laughter erupted from the back of the room. "Who cares about her dad?" someone shouted. Zuri's heart raced, and for a moment, she wished she could disappear. A part of her wanted to run away, to hide from the judgment that felt like a heavy blanket, suffocating her. But another part of her, a small flicker of strength, urged her to stand firm. "Zuri, just sit down," Madison called out, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "No one wants to hear your boring story." The words stung, but Zuri took another breath. "Actually, my dad is important. He fought hard for his dreams," she said, her voice gaining strength. The room grew quiet, and Zuri could see a few heads turn in curiosity. "What did he do?" asked a boy in the front, his tone shifting from mockery to real interest. Zuri hesitated for a moment, surprised by the question. "He always told me to be proud of who I am. He faced a lot of challenges because of his skin color," she replied, her voice steadying. "And he taught me that our heritage is a part of us. It shapes who we are." For the first time, there was silence in the room. Zuri felt a mix of fear and bravery. She could see some students leaning in, their expressions changing. The laughter had faded, replaced by a sense of curiosity. "What kind of challenges?" another student asked, genuinely interested. Zuri took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. He dealt with racism and prejudice. "People judged him before they even got to know him," she explained. "But he never gave up. He worked hard and showed everyone that he was worth it." As she spoke, Zuri could feel the flicker of strength growing inside her. She thought about her father's legacy and how it was a part of her identity. "I want to honor him by not being ashamed of who I am," she said, her voice rising with confidence. "I am Zuri Johnson, and I deserve to be seen and heard, just like everyone else." The room remained silent, and Zuri could see some students exchanging glances. Madison looked taken aback, her expression shifting from arrogance to surprise. Zuri felt a rush of empowerment, realizing that she had taken a stand. "Zuri, that was actually pretty cool," one girl said, breaking the silence. "I didn't know your dad had to go through all that." Zuri smiled, surprised by the support. "Thanks. It's a part of who I am," she replied, her heart swelling with hope. In that moment, Zuri understood that sharing her story was not just about her father, but also about her own journey. She was no longer invisible, and for the first time, she felt like she belonged. The laughter and whispers that once surrounded her began to fade, replaced by a newfound respect. As she finished her presentation, Zuri looked around the room, her heart soaring. She had faced her fears and embraced her heritage, and in doing so, she had taken the first step toward finding her voice. The power of revelation had ignited a spark within her, and she was ready to embrace the journey ahead. Zuri stood at the back of the classroom, her heart racing as she processed the ripple of attention she had suddenly gained. Her classmates, once mere shadows in her life, were now focused on her, their eyes filled with a mix of curiosity and uncertainty. She could not shake off the feeling that they were more interested in her father's fame than in her story. "Why do they care now?" Zuri thought, her brow furrowing. "Are they really interested in me, or just my dad?" Anger bubbled inside her. It felt unfair that her peers would only pay attention because of who her father was. She remembered the hurtful laughter from before, and it was hard to believe that they could change so easily. As she stood there, a mixture of confusion and frustration washed over her. She wanted to be accepted for who she was, not just as the daughter of a famous man. "Hey, Zuri!" called out Ryan, a boy from her class, breaking her thoughts. "That was pretty cool what you said about your dad. What's he like?" Zuri felt her heart sink again. Just like that, she thought. They don't want to know me, they want to know him. The room buzzed with whispers and glances, and Zuri felt the weight of their eyes on her, She remembered her father's teachings about self-acceptance and strength. He always encouraged her to embrace who she was, to stand tall against the world's judgment. Maybe I can do that, she whispered to herself, her resolve slowly growing. Maybe I can show them that I am more than just a name. As the days passed, Zuri found herself wrapped in a whirlwind of emotions. Some days, she felt angry at her classmates for their hypocrisy. Other days, she felt confused about her own desires for acceptance. She wanted to belong, but feared being judged for her father's image, rather than her own character. "Zuri, are you okay?" her friend Lila asked one afternoon as they sat together during lunch. "You seem different." Zuri took a deep breath, unsure of how to express her feelings. I don't know if they really see me, Lila. I feel like they only see my dad." Lila nodded, understanding in her eyes. "That's tough, but you are amazing in your own right. You have a story to tell too." Zuri smiled weakly, but felt a flicker of hope. Maybe Lila was right. Maybe she could find a way to use her voice, to challenge her classmates to look beyond the surface. One evening, as she sat in her room, Zuri thought more about her father's lessons. He had always talked about fighting against racism and standing up for what was right. "I can channel my pain into power," she thought, determination rising within her. "I can teach them." The next day, Zuri walked into school with a new sense of purpose. She decided to approach her teacher, Ms. Clark, after class. "Ms. Clark, can I talk to you about doing a presentation?" she asked, her voice steady. "Of course, Zuri. What do you have in mind?" Ms. Clark replied, her interest piqued. Zuri took a deep breath. "I want to share my story. I want to talk about acceptance and how we can be better to each other." Ms. Clark smiled warmly. "That sounds like a wonderful idea, Zuri. I believe your voice can make a difference." As Zuri walked home that day, she felt lighter. The decision to speak out filled her with hope. She knew that her classmates needed to confront their biases, and she was ready to lead the charge. The next few days were filled with preparation. Zuri gathered her thoughts, her heart racing at the idea of standing in front of her peers. She rehearsed in front of the mirror, practicing her words. "I am Zuri Johnson," she would say, "and I am more than just my father's daughter. I have my own story, and it matters." The night before the presentation, Zuri lay in bed, nerves swirling within her. But she remembered her father's words. "Be brave, Zuri. Stand up for yourself and for others." With a newfound determination, she closed her eyes, ready to face the challenge ahead. Zuri stood in front of the school auditorium, her heart racing. The bright lights above shone down on her, making the room feel both too big and too small at the same time. She had organized this assembly to share her story, and now that the moment had arrived, she felt a mix of fear and determination. Taking a deep breath, she stepped up to the microphone, her hands shaking slightly as she grasped it. "Good morning, everyone," she started, her voice soft but clear. The chatter in the room died down, and she could feel the eyes of her classmates on her. Zuri noticed Madison sitting in the front row, arms crossed, wearing an expression of indifference. But Zuri knew better. Deep down, she felt that Madison was just as scared as she was. As she began to speak, Zuri's words came tumbling out. "I want to share my experiences with you. I've faced bullying and racism. I've felt alone, invisible, and judged." She could see some students shifting in their seats, glancing at each other. A few of them looked uncomfortable, which gave her a small sense of hope. "I know many of you have heard my name because of my dad. He is famous, but that doesn't mean I am. I am Zuri Johnson, not just his daughter." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "Some of you laughed at me, whispered behind my back, and made me feel like I didn't belong. But I am here to tell you that I do belong." Zuri paused, her eyes scanning the crowd. "I want to talk about empathy. It's easy to judge someone when you don't know their story. But I am asking you to listen to mine." She took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words as she revealed the moments that had hurt her the most. I remember one day in the cafeteria, Zuri recounted. I sat alone, and a group of girls laughed at my lunch. They called it weird, but what they didn't know was that my mom made that food for me because it is part of my culture. It's special to me. She could see a few faces softening, and it felt like a small victory. Madison, Zuri said, addressing the queen bee directly. I know you have your own struggles. I believe everyone has a story, even if they don't show it. Madison's expression changed slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. Zuri pressed on, feeling the energy shift in the room. I think it's time we all start sharing our stories instead of hiding behind our walls. Madison shifted in her seat, her arms uncrossing slightly. What do you mean? She asked, her tone surprisingly vulnerable. I mean that we can change the way we treat each other, Zuri replied, her heart racing. We can choose kindness over cruelty. I believe we can build a community where everyone feels accepted, but it starts with us being honest and brave. Zuri felt a swell of courage as she looked around the room. Some students were nodding, others were whispering to each other. She continued, I want to create a space where we can talk about our differences and learn from one another. We all have something to teach and something to learn. As she finished her speech, Zuri felt a wave of relief wash over her. The silence in the room was heavy, but it was different from before. Now it was filled with understanding. She had spoken her truth, and it resonated with many. Thank you for listening, she said, her voice steady now. Let's break the silence together. The auditorium erupted into applause, and Zuri felt tears prick at her eyes. She had taken a huge step, and it had been worth it. After the assembly, students began to approach her, some with smiles, others with shy words of support. Zuri realized she had sparked something in them, a desire to be better, to understand more. She had moved them, and maybe, just maybe, they would remember her words. Hey Zuri, Madison said quietly as she walked up. I never thought about it that way. I'm sorry. The sincerity in Madison's voice made Zuri pause. Thank you, Madison. That means a lot, Zuri replied, her heart warming. At that moment, Zuri knew they were on the path to something greater. She had broken the silence, and perhaps it was the first step toward healing, not just for herself, but for everyone. As the days passed after Zuri's brave speech at the assembly, something changed within the school. The laughter that once echoed in the hallways was now mixed with whispers of admiration. Zuri felt a new energy around her, one that made her heart race with both excitement and nervousness. One afternoon, while Zuri sat at a table in the cafeteria, she noticed Madison approaching her. Zuri's mind raced. What does she want? She thought, her stomach twisting in knots. When Madison reached her, she looked different, less like the queen bee and more like a girl seeking connection. Hey, Zuri, Madison said, her voice softer than usual. Can I sit here? Zuri hesitated but nodded. Sure, what's up? Madison took a seat and looked around, avoiding eye contact. I wanted to say, I'm sorry for how I acted before. I didn't understand what you were going through. Zuri was taken aback. You really mean that? You made my life really hard. I know, Madison replied, a hint of shame in her voice. I thought it was funny. I didn't think about how it affected you. Can we start over? Zuri pondered this. Could she really trust Madison? The girl who had once made her feel small now wanted to build a bridge. I guess we can try, Zuri said cautiously. As the weeks went by, Zuri began to form unexpected friendships. She found herself laughing with Madison during lunch, sharing stories about their families and dreams. It was strange but refreshing. Zuri could see that Madison was trying to change, and that made her heart feel lighter. One day, while they were walking through the school hallway, Zuri stopped to talk with a group of students who were discussing a project on cultural diversity. Inspired by her own experiences, she shared her thoughts. What if we created a club? A place where everyone can talk about their backgrounds and feel accepted? Madison chimed in. That's a great idea. We could call it Voices of Unity. Zuri smiled, feeling a surge of excitement. Yeah, we could host meetings, share our stories, and even invite guest speakers to talk about their cultures. The idea spread quickly. Soon, students from all grades wanted to join. Zuri felt a deep sense of belonging as they gathered in a classroom. She stood in front of the group, her heart pounding with joy. Welcome, everyone. I'm so glad you're here. This is a space for us to learn and grow together. As they began to share their stories, Zuri noticed how the room transformed. Each voice added a layer to the conversation, building understanding and empathy. One girl spoke about her family's traditions during Diwali, while a boy shared his experiences with being the only one in his class who spoke Spanish at home. Madison listened attentively, her expression earnest. We all have different stories, she said, glancing at Zuri. But they matter. We need to respect each other. Zuri nodded, her heart swelling with pride. Exactly. We can help each other feel seen and valued. Through these gatherings, Zuri became a voice for those who felt marginalized. She organized activities that celebrated their diverse cultures, such as potlucks, where everyone brought a dish from their heritage. The school began to buzz with excitement, and the students who once felt alone now found camaraderie. As Zuri navigated this new social landscape, she learned the importance of self-love. She realized that her worth was not defined by the opinions of others, but by her actions and the connections she built. The support from her friends, including Madison, helped her see that she was stronger than she ever thought. Zuri, Madison said one day after a successful meeting, you're really making a difference. I admire you. Thanks, Madison, Zuri replied, a smile brightening her face. I couldn't have done this without everyone's support, including yours. As the school year continued, Zuri felt a deep sense of purpose. She was no longer just a girl trying to survive the school day. She was a leader, a friend, and a source of inspiration for others. Together, they were building bridges, creating a community that celebrated acceptance and understanding. As the school year approached its end, excitement filled the air. Zuri and her classmates prepared for a special event to celebrate diversity. Banners hung from the walls, each representing different cultures. The cafeteria buzzed with energy as students set up tables filled with colorful decorations, traditional foods, and artifacts that told their stories. Zuri felt a mix of pride and nervousness as she looked around. Zuri, are you ready for today? Asked Mia, her new friend, adjusting her colorful scarf. Zuri smiled, her heart racing. I think so. It's just a lot of people, you know? Mia nodded, her eyes bright with encouragement. You've got this. Look how far you've come. You're not just sharing your story anymore. You're leading this. Zuri took a deep breath, remembering the weight she used to feel from her classmates' stares. Now, she stood tall, ready to share her journey. As she approached the stage, the warm lights bathed her in a golden glow, and she spotted familiar faces in the crowd. Hey, Zuri, called out Ethan, waving enthusiastically. We can't wait to hear you speak. The warmth of his support filled her with confidence. As she stepped up to the microphone, she could feel the eyes of her peers on her, but this time, it didn't intimidate her. Instead, it fueled her determination. Hi, everyone, Zuri began, her voice steady. Today is about celebrating who we are and where we come from. I want to share a bit of my story. A hush fell over the room as silence replaced the usual chatter. Zuri's heart swelled as she looked out at her classmates. She started with the struggles she faced at the beginning of the year, the laughter that echoed in the hallways, and the moments that made her feel invisible. But, she continued, I learned that my story is not just about pain. It's about strength. It's about embracing who I am, and it's about making a change. Zuri glanced at Madison in the front row, her expression softening. We all have our own stories. Each of us has something unique to bring to this school. I want to challenge everyone here to celebrate that. As she spoke, Zuri could see some students nodding, their expressions shifting from indifference to interest. She felt a surge of energy as she shared her father's legacy and how it shaped her identity. Daniel Johnson was not just a famous figure. He was a person who fought for what was right. He taught me that our differences make us strong. The audience listened intently. Zuri took a moment to let her words sink in before she continued. We can all be a part of the change. We can all stand against negativity and embrace our differences. A ripple of applause erupted as she finished her speech. Zuri's heart raced with excitement. She stepped down from the stage, and a group of students surrounded her, their faces bright with enthusiasm. "Zuri, that was amazing," said Ethan, grinning from ear to ear. "You really inspired us." "Yeah, I never thought about how important our stories are," added Mia. "I want to share mine next time." Just then, Zuri spotted Madison approaching. Zuri's heart skipped a beat. Would Madison confront her, or perhaps apologize? But instead, Madison looked different. There was a softness in her eyes. "Zuri, I wanted to say that I'm sorry for how I treated you," Madison said, her voice quiet. "You've shown me that I need to be better." Zuri felt a wave of surprise wash over her. "Thank you, Madison. It means a lot to hear you say that." Madison smiled, and Zuri realized that change was possible, even for those who once hurt her. As the celebration continued, Zuri felt a sense of belonging that she had longed for. Students gathered around, sharing their own stories and cultures. Laughter filled the room, and Zuri felt the weight of isolation lift off her shoulders. Later that day, as the sun began to set, Zuri stood in front of a mirror in her room. She looked at her reflection, noticing not just her skin color, but the strength that radiated from within. "I see you, Zuri," she whispered to herself, a smile creeping across her face. "You are beautiful, strong, and worthy." In that moment, she felt hope blossom in her heart. Hope for herself, for her friends, and for a future where everyone embraced their true selves. Share Zuri's inspiring journey if you believe that embracing our differences can lead to powerful change. Leave a comment about a moment when you found strength in your own story, and subscribe to our channel for more uplifting stories like this one.